Hey folks, in this interview, I'm talking with Erin Babnik about adventure and wilderness photography. This is TWIP. Hey, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I'm your host, Frederick Van Johnson. I have Erin Babnik on the show. Erin and I met at a trade show, Photo Plus Expo, several months ago, and I've been begging her to come on This Week in Photo since then. I finally, through no help from the universe, I finally got her on the show. And we are going to be talking about, like I said, adventure, wilderness photography. We're going to be talking about her workshops. We're going to be talking about all kinds of cool stuff. But this is the first time Erin has been on This Week in Photo, so I want to dive in and kind of do the origin story of Erin Babnik and what makes her tick. Why is she a photographer versus a painter or a sculptor or something like that? We're going to dive into all that stuff, and then we're going to talk about these awesome workshops that she's doing. So, Erin, welcome to This Week in Photo. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's really, really a pleasure to be here at long last, Frederick.
I know. We've been trying to make this happen. I was telling you as we were dialoguing back and forth in email, every now and then, I do a lot of interviews, but every now and then there's these gremlins that show up that are like, this is not going to happen. They're either scheduling gremlins or Skype gremlins or something shows up,
Yeah, they were definitely conspiring against us for a while there. We beat them.
Yeah, we beat them. We had technical gremlins and force of nature gremlins. Let's just say that were stopping us from doing this show. But let's dive in. So tell me about Erin. Tell me about the stuff that, what makes you tick? How did you get started in the creative world? I know I'm fairly certain you didn't start in photography. You started somewhere else and then you landed here. How did that go?
I transitioned out of a former career as an art historian. So I had to do some photography for that in order to develop an archive of photos for teaching and research. I was out in Europe and the Middle East for a long while, photographing archaeological sites and artifacts that were of interest to me, things that I needed when I was working on my dissertation and when I was teaching later. And it was a very slippery slope. I just really, really enjoyed the process of being out with the camera. And having also had a background in backpacking and a lot of just being very outdoorsy in general, it was just a matter of time before I finally admitted to myself that I really kind of enjoyed the photography, probably more than anything else that I was doing.
Yeah.
And I also realized at some point that everything that I enjoyed about my career as an art historian would transfer over almost perfectly to photography as well. I didn't have to give up anything: the teaching, the lecturing, the being creative, which you are as an historian. Getting to go to exotic places, doing a lot of travel, the research, everything. Because I'm also a writer. It all just ported right over.
Yeah. Well, tell me about that, because I'm always curious about, that career field, art history, art historian. What does that mean? When someone says I'm an art historian, what exactly does that mean? What's a day in the life of an art historian?
Well, my specialty was ancient art. So I not only spent most of the academic year, the semesters when the university, I was at UC Berkeley when the university was actually in session. My job was basically to teach the undergrads and also do my own research and writing. And so that meant lecturing and grading papers, which is one thing I'm very happy not to have to do. That's the one thing that I lost that I do not miss. But then also during the summers, because I was a classicist specializing in the ancient world, I was also de facto archaeologist. And that required me to spend lots of time getting really dirty, getting up really early, kind of all the stuff that I'm still doing.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time excavating in Israel. And so those two things were kind of how I used up a lot of my time in the summers, being out in the field, excavating, photographing, also going to museums. That was part of my job. part of my research. And then all the other stuff that you do in a classroom, which I don't miss so much, except for I enjoy the lecturing and I enjoy being with students, and I still do those things. But spending lots of time in dusty old underground libraries, not so much.
You know what? I'm getting a feeling here that you're Indiana Jones. Come on.
I've been accused
have
of
giant
that before,
boulders
yeah.
been chasing you around? And that is fantastic. You're the Indiana Jones of photography. That is fantastic. So you are we kind of glossed over it, and I guess people could sort of discern it by the conversation that we're having. But you hold a PhD in art history. So you're Dr. Babnik, as we talk through this.
Almost. Yeah. Actually, I was ABD, all but dissertation, and I had 3 chapters of my dissertation done and all the funding I needed to finish the last 2 that were required of me. And that was when things really came to a head. People were knocking on my door for things I wasn't even offering as a photographer. And I had to make a really, really tough decision whether or not I felt it was necessary to finish the PhD. I was already teaching and all of that before that. I just needed to finish the book. But it would have meant going 100% full-time on that. And I felt like the iron was hot and it was time to strike with the photography. And after much, much soul searching, I realized that I wasn't going to lose anything by making the transition over to being a full-time photographer. And in fact, I would just gain everything that I was missing in life. And I was right. I feel like that was probably one of the best decisions I ever made.
I love that. Yeah. Follow your heart,
Yeah.
do what you love, and the rest will follow. Right. I want to, while I have you on the hot seat, this is one of the few times, if not the only time, that I've had someone on the show that has a formal art background, and you're a painter transitioned into the world of photography. And I know very little about how to be a painter, that world. So these, bear with me, these questions are coming from a position of ignorance, right? So when I think of painting, and I think of the old masters and the new masters, people that are making work today, I think of the artist having control over every stroke. Everything is intentional, for the most part. You have control over the light. Everything in that image you have 100% control over. Whereas if you translate or transition into photography, that's not necessarily the case. You have control over a lot of aspects of the image, but not every aspect of the image. What was the main thing that was the hardest thing to sort of overcome when you made the jump from a traditional painting sort of creative outlet to pixels and screens and cameras and megapixels and all that stuff?
That's a good question, but I would have to kind of flesh that out a little more by emphasizing that although I was a painter, I was also a graphic designer. I worked professionally at that to help put myself through my undergraduate education in my first couple of years of my master's degree. So I have that background, as well as my specialty. My dissertation was on sculpture, Greek sculpture specifically. So I have this sort of overview of media that goes way beyond painting. And I was bringing all of that to my photography. So, for example, when I go out, I'm photographing landscapes, which is what I do. I see trees and mountains as abstract sculptures in a landscape. I see them. All of that is ingrained in me from my experience of looking at sculpture and studying the composition of sculpture and that sort of thing. What I brought from the painting over to my photography is really what I do in post-processing. So, for example, one of my most recent, most popular articles is on color theory for landscape photographers, which is essentially about color grading and finessing tones and hues in an image the way that a painter would. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of that in my processing. So yeah, it's really kind of a mixture of all those things. I think that the biggest challenges for me at first were the same ones that a lot of people deal with when they get into photography. Having to learn a lot about light, but I did also, because I was photographing in museums create my own light, and I was way into strobist stuff. And I did some product photography. I shot models for a while. I did all kinds of stuff that taught me a lot about light. But I think those sorts of challenges, learning about light, and for sure learning how to compose, by finding things. That is something that is probably the sticking point for most photographers, especially landscape photographers, because you are having to sort of go out there and organize the world, just basically using your choice of where you put your feet and what lenses you're using and framing and whatnot. And so that is quite different. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I like to, when I talk to landscape photographers, and I'm not a landscape photographer, but I enjoy, I'm looking at your website right now as we're talking, and the images are just, otherworldly for lack of another way to describe it.
That's a good thing.
They're beautiful. Yeah. Because this world, I don't know. Other worlds are great. No, but your work is fantastic, and I always admire landscape photographers, people that are doing this genre of photography, because when I go out, I can't see what you see. Right? I can't see that landscape that you see. Maybe I need to take one of your workshops, we're going to talk about in a second. But I can't see what you see. How do you, what are some tips for people that are watching this and they want to be, maybe not your level of landscape photographer, but they want to be competent in the genre? How do you get a different shot of, say, El Capitan in Yosemite here in California that hasn't been done before, right? Ooh. Or, what's
that's
the
a whole
secret?
Other issue. I tend to prefer areas where I can really hear myself think, and I don't feel as though the place is haunted by the footsteps of a million other photographers. So most of the images that you'll find on my website, those are all from locations that I discovered myself. I've been independently exploring areas of the Dolomites, Death Valley, and many other places for over a decade now, French Alps. So there are very few places that I tend to go where, they are those sort of iconic spots, just because that's not as much fun for me as places where I feel as though it's wide open and the challenge is there for me to figure it out. So there's that. Yeah. So, but when you are in a situation where you're in a place and it is very familiar, and you want to try to do something that's your own, I think the best thing to always start out with is just to have some kind of response and to work from that. And in some places where a lot of people have been there and have already, then there aren't that many options. Well, then maybe you are going to come up with something that's kind of similar to what other people have done. In which case you can maybe just, process it better. That's really what it comes down to. But I prefer those spots where you can look at a place, have a response to it, ask yourself, what is it that I'm seeing here that I think is really important and special? What kind of story am I feeling here? And I've written a lot about all of that sort of thing. And then try to find a way to keep things out that don't contribute to that story, and to keep things in that help to kind of emphasize it, basically.
Yeah. It's that sort of begs the question, is the work that you're doing, what's a better way to frame this? A lot of photographers use photography as sort of therapy or catharsis in some way, as an outlet away from the stresses or stressors of their lives. Are you the same way? Like when you're out and about shooting, is it just like, I'd rather be no place else? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I believe that 100%. In fact, that's why I feel that teaching is an act of service in photography, because I'm helping people to have that outlet, and helping them to find ways to express themselves, give them this kind of outlet that's not so defined and something that's more open-ended than what most people have on offer to them as ways to express themselves. Visual language is a different kind of opportunity to kind of work through and release and just have that catharsis and have fun and be a more relaxed, well-balanced, happy person. Yeah. And that's a big part of what I teach.
Well, speaking of that, and sort of like I said, I want to transition into. I'm just slowly transitioning into these awesome workshops that you provide. I want to talk about the adventures that you've had. Right. So
Okay.
just from us speaking for we've been talking for 15 minutes already. So just from speaking from 15 minutes, you've been around the world. You're in Slovenia right now, as we
Yeah.
record this. The soles of your feet don't cool off, right? So
Not really.
you're all
I'm on
over
the
the
road
place.
about 300 days a year. Yeah.
Wow, 300 days a year. So, okay. So, we could obviously talk for hours about all that stuff, but give me some highlights, some adventures of some locations where you're like, my life was changed when I went to X, Y, and Z because of, whatever. Like, I'll speak to Martin Bailey and he'll say, "Yeah, I went to the snow monkeys have changed my life in Japan." What is Erin Babnik's snow monkey?
Well, my biggest story, and it's one that I've told a lot, but is probably my love affair with the Dolomites. I think that's what really formed me as a photographer. When I first started going out there, it was about a decade ago, before the era of social media, before there were many photographers doing more than the sort of the valley shots and a few very typical traditional shots. In fact, I remember being told once by an Italian that there's just certain ways that you do things. You go to these places and you shoot these things. But by that point, fortunately, I'd already been on the ground doing things my way for just because I didn't know what else to do. So I bought a bunch of maps, a bunch of topographical maps, and I just went out exploring. And I had a lot of adventures, got myself into all kind of trouble.
I want to hear about that
Learned
trouble. What is that? Like what Indiana Jones, sinking in quicksand trouble or what?
Yeah. I've had some kind of hairy kind of scrapes with danger, just climbing around places, having maps that are mismarked or out of date, and going places and getting myself caught like a cat in a tree up some trail where I really should have been equipped with climbing gear, and the map I had wasn't telling me that. Yeah, so I've definitely had those sorts of situations. And for sure, being just out in all kinds of crazy weather and a lot of just feet on the ground, strenuous kind of stuff too, that just developed a lot of my sensibilities as an artist, and just also really just kept me really just enthusiastic because of the rewarding nature of finding things and feeling as though you're doing something that's never been done before quite.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
What's the one place that you'd like to go, like that you would go back to again and again? Like your number one place on the planet, your desert island place where, hey, someone said, "Hey, Erin, after this week, you can't travel again, and you're gonna have to drop anchor." And where would your drop anchor place be?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, of all the places that I have been, there would be one answer, I guess, and then the other answer is I'm craving. You mentioned the desert island. I'm actually craving some island time. I would love to get out into something tropical and work in an area like that. I don't know where, the Seychelles Islands or something.
There you go. Just
Something really remote.
Drop you on some remote atoll somewhere, and with your camera and some solar powered battery chargers, you're good to go. So let's transition and talk about these workshops that you're doing. So the reason while you're traveling the planet and going to these exotic places is not, part of it, I would assume, is because you just want to go there, but you're also teaching people and using your education and background and those skills, those superpowers to help people see differently and understand photography in exotic places. Tell me about that and how that came about.
Yeah, quite accidentally. People started asking me if I taught workshops or if I would do private workshops before I ever was even offering them, or anything like that was listed on my website. And that was one of the last pushes that got me into going full time with my photography. Before, I was really just doing part-time work, assignment work, mostly is what I was doing. Completely different kind of photography. And I finally just, went in and did it because I really wanted to teach, and I really enjoyed doing it. So My workshops have evolved into a rolling creative laboratory in every case. I do not only do I take people outdoors, out in the field, I also run seminars in all of my workshops. So creativity seminars, composition seminars. I do one on the history of landscape photography. I have a post-processing seminars. So it's really a way for me to give people everything that I can to help them to progress on their own terms. So rather than me trying to make everybody in my own mold and just make little clones of me, I'm constantly looking for ways to enable people to sort of blossom as an artist on their own. And so far, it's working really well. And people are loving the seminars, and it's really exciting to see people just become extremely excited out in the field because of things that are in their head, from all that we've been talking about. I had a couple of students in one of my recent workshops. Two of them independently came up to me and said, "Wow, paradigm shift." They used exactly that term, and I thought that's awesome.
That is fantastic, and that
gave them a whole new way in.
Yeah, that's got to make you feel good as an educator, right? That's what you're looking for, is the paradigm shift. And like, I want to get you across this chasm and have the sun start shining. You understand this concept, and now it's simple, and you can go do stuff. Rather than just saying, here's the shot, take that shot, which is more of the tour approach than the workshop approach. Yeah, and I appreciate that, because I've seen workshops, I've been on workshops where it is that exactly. It's where put your feet here, set your camera at this f-stop, this ISO, and this shutter speed, aim in that direction, press the button.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we'll talk about how that happened versus why we're doing that and that sort of thing. So tell me more about the workshop. So where are you? There's a list, obviously, of different workshops that you're holding, but where's the next one? How much does it cost? How many people do you allow on these workshops?
My workshops are relatively small. They range from about 8 to 12 participants each. My next one, I haven't listed it yet, but I'm going to be doing I'm bringing back my master class in Death Valley National Park. That'll be be listed soon. That'll be in the first week of December. But then I also have currently listed right now, I still have a couple spots left in my early July Dolomites session, my Adventure in the Dolomites workshop. I think that's how much? I never can remember what they cost because I have so many different ones.
It's on the website. We'll put it on the website.
Yeah, it's on the website. Yeah. I think it's about $4,000 for that. It's an all-inclusive workshop. And then I've got a whole bunch of exciting ones coming in 2020, and that list will go up at the end of this month too. And that includes my winter Dolomites, Iceland. I do an Icelandic Highlands trip, so taking monster trucks out into the Icelandic Highlands, where last time we didn't see a single paved road or another photographer for 9 days out there. So very remote, very peaceful, very inspiring.
I love this.
Yeah.
That is, I love how calm and confident you are. You're like, and then we did this trip to, to the moon, and we hung out at a crater for a while. And, I'm thinking of going to Mars. I don't know about that.
I do tend to take people to places that most workshops will not go in a lot of cases. So I find a way to get them there. In my Winter Dolomites workshop, we're taking snowmobiles. In the Iceland Highlands, we're taking monster trucks, whatever.
That's
and
great.
in my summer Dolomites, we hike. We backpack
that.
out to refuge huts.
All right, I'm gonna have to scrape up some money and come on one of your workshops. It sounds awesome. So as we close this out, I want to see if I want to get some tips out of you, and mainly for the people that are listening to this. Many of the This Week in Photo audience are. Most of us are photographers, right? But a lot of the people that listen to the show are trapped in a cubicle. They're in their 9-to-5 tech job or medical job or whatever, and they're listening to us right now as they do their job, and they're like, man, I want to go on a snowmobile with Erin, So what's the secret? I mean, you're a well-traveled person. What is the secret to to, other than, getting online, booking a ticket and booking a hotel, what's the secret to pushing yourself, to getting out there, to traveling and picking a location and going to that location to photograph, even if you're not going on a workshop? How do you make that leap? Because it's not, for most of the people that are listening, it's not money, because it's not that expensive to travel these days. But what's the key? What's the secret?
I think that you have to, it is sort of an act of faith that, will I go out there and just waste my time? Because I think that's more so what people are giving you when they take your workshop, the most valuable thing they have to offer, and that's their time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing that that holds people back sometimes, is, what am I going to get out of this? And, I could be, of all the things in the world I could be doing, mm-hmm. Why that? Why travel? And I feel as though it's something where you just have to say, if you feel as though you're here with your photography and you want to be here, mm-hmm. It helps not only to just sort of get out of your normal routine of doing things, but also your normal areas of doing things. And travel on a workshop enables you to do both of those things, provided that it's truly a workshop where you're learning new things, but also just getting yourself into a new location can really help bring on the inspiration and just kind of help you sort of rechannel and move forward.
Yeah, and how do you mitigate the fear of traveling? The fear of something bad happening. There's a lot of unrest in the world, right? And there's a lot of places where you probably shouldn't go these days, and some that you absolutely should go to. How do you sort of manage that part of it?
Well, that's also the beauty of the workshop. So you're traveling with people who are going to take care of you, basically.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm a certified wilderness first responder. I go way out of my way to make sure that everybody's very comfortable and well taken care of, and they don't have to worry about those things because I've already done the worrying for them. That
is fantastic. Yeah, that's I don't want to gloss over that too much, because that part is what, and I'm glad you said that. I was hoping you were going to say that. That's one of the key parts of why you would go on a workshop and pay that money. It's not just because, hey, I want to go hang out with Erin Babnik. It's also, Erin has created an atmosphere of safety. She's scouted the locations. You know where you're going to eat. You don't have to figure that out. One of the fears that a lot of people have, even in American cities, I think, it's like, I'm going to a new city, and there's certain areas that you shouldn't go into, and you don't know that you shouldn't go into them. You wander in there with $20,000 worth of camera gear, and the next day your life is different, right? So you do all that legwork, and it's just by the numbers, and you're the tour guide, basically, right?
Well, I actually don't identify as a tour guide. That's one thing I say I'm not, but I mean, in a way, I'm performing some of those functions, but I'm an educator above all. I run workshops, not tours.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I've got all that basic stuff covered in addition, that I can really take care of people for my workshops abroad. All they have to do is show up at an airport. I pick them up there, or my transportation company does, and we drop them back off there. And everything in between is all taken care of. So they just have to concentrate on being inspired and having a good time.
I love it. And we can leave it right there. That is perfect. So all this information is at erinbabnik.com, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So all roads lead to erinbabnik.com. Obviously, in the blog post for this episode, I'll put all your information, and in the YouTube description, all that, etc., so people can find you very easily. But Erin Babnik is Babnik, Erin. If you're listening to this, write it down right now. ErinBabnik.com, and you can check out all the stuff that we've been talking about. Erin, this has been a pleasure speaking with you. I think it's well worth the wait.
Likewise, Frederick.
Yeah, well worth the wait to get this recorded. And I'm humbled at the stuff that you have done and are doing, and your enthusiasm and sort of the ethos of how you're trying to not, like you say, be a tour guide and not just run another, rubber stamped workshop, rather you're educating people and creating those epiphany moments. I think that's important.
Exactly.
And it's you're filling a missing area in photography. Everybody and their mama has a workshop these days, right? But,
Right.
Very few people have real experiences like you're building. So congratulations on that.
Well, thanks so much, Frederick. Really appreciate you saying that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. Thanks a lot, Erin Babnik, and we'll see you on TWIP. I'm going to invite you, and I said this off the air, I want to officially invite you while we're recording this to come on This Week in Photo as one of our guests when we do our roundtable sort of shows. I'd love to have your voice in the chorus there as we discuss the news of the week, if you're up for it.
Well, then I officially accept.
There you go, right there. All right, we're engaged. Cool. All right, Erin Babnik, thank you so much.
It's fun, Frederick.
Okay, take care. This is TWIP.